Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start the meeting in 1 minute if people can take their seats. On va commencer la réunion dans une minute. If anyone would like to speak to any item on the agenda, please see the clerk under the television screen to my right. Merci. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à la Comité des finances et de développement économique. Welcome to the Finance and Economic Development Committee for the 5th of June, 2018. Declarations of interest. Confirmation of minutes. Minutes 37, le 1er mai 2018, the 1st of May 2018. Carried. Communications as presented. Presentations, Councillor El Shantiri has a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we have three presentations: the Confederation Line, Refugee Resettlement, and the Ottawa 2017. Therefore, be it resolved that the Finance and Economic Development Committee waive the rules of procedure to receive the presentations listed in as item 1, 2, and 3 on today's FEDCO agenda, and pursuant to subsection 83.4, dispense with the requirement for staff to provide a separate written report on these presentations.
So on the motion, carried. So we'll just go through the consent agenda. So we have the three presentations. Item number 4, we'll hold it because it deals with the presentation for Ottawa 2017, so we'll come back to that. Office of the City Clerk and Solicitor, Bureau du Greffier Municipal et de l'Avocat Général, amendment to the composition of the Glebe Business Improvement Area Board of Management, modification à la composition du Conseil d'administration de la zone d'amélioration commerciale du Glebe. Carried. Item 6, status update, Finance and Economic Development Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending May 25th, rapport de situation jusqu'à le 25 mai 2018. Received. Corporate Services Department, Direction Générale des Services, Delegation of Authority, Acquisition and Sale of Land and Property, January 1st, 2018 to March 31st, 2018. Délégation de pouvoir, acquisition et vente de terrain de 1er janvier 2018 au 31 mars 2018. Proceed. Item 8, capital budget adjustment and closing of projects, city tax and rate supported. Hold on that, and we have a motion. Why don't we just move your motion now, Councillor, to get that out of the way. This is to put it, there was a slight change in column 3, I believe.
Actually, this was to add the report.
Oh, I'm sorry, so it's to add this report to the agenda. So, Councillor, if you'd like to move that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And therefore, be it resolved that Finance and Economic Development Committee approve the addition of this item to consider the report titled Capital Budget Adjustment and Closing of Project, City Tax and Rate Supported, listed as item 8 on today's agenda pursuant to subsection 89 of the Procedures Bylaw.
Okay, agreed, carried. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Item 9, Financing Lease Arrangements 2017, Convention de Crédit Bail 2017. Carried.
Okay.
Item 10, 2017 Investments Endowment Fund and Other Treasury Activity Report. Some good news in this. We congratulate you. Is it a quick question, Councillor?
No, I think this should come back.
Sorry? Okay. All right. Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Department, Direction Générale de Planification de l'Infrastructure et de Développement Économique. Implementation plan for the Ottawa Public Library and Archives Canada Joint Facility. Carried?
Is that the library?
Yeah.
No, hold.
Oh, another hold. What's that? She said hold.
Said, is that the library one?
Okay, so we'll come back to that. And Brownfields Grant Program, we have delegations and a presentation, so we'll come back to that. Okay, so we have our monthly presentation on Confederation Line. Mr. Manconi is here with his staff to bring us up to date. And following that is Councillor Kakish doing a refugee resettlement update, and then the Ottawa 2017 final update, and then we'll go to the Brownfield project. There is space in the caucus room just out through that door. The sound is piped in through there if people would like to take a seat. And there's some seats over here as well if you'd like. So I think we have PowerPoint. Might be shining on you, Tim. Do we have the second screen? Matt's going to do that. Okay, so Councillor Dean's on the, what item was that, Councillor? 10, no longer has a question. So on the investment, which is great news, I was going to thank the Treasurer for our wise investment policy. Carried? Okay. So here we go, Mr. Manconi, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bonjour à tous. Happy to be before you, giving you your monthly update. This represents the work to date that we've been doing with RTG. I want to start off with a focus on train testing. You've obviously seen a lot of activity on the eastern corridor. That's where the majority of the movements are, all the movements are occurring. And what you're seeing now are multiple trains, as this is next to Herdman Station. So those trains are going through vigorous testing. The other thing that you're seeing, you may have seen, is we've coupled two vehicles together. This is how the train is going to be operating in service. This is how you get your capacity. It's 600 passengers and almost a football field in length. And I have for you a short video that demonstrates the length of the vehicle. Also, you'll see the numerous numbers of doors as we go through the video. Just give me a second here. Do you want to get that one? And I'm going to get my technician down because he knows how to do this video. Just give me a second, please.
And we don't have the French.
Well, it's blacked out right here. Usually just like
This is quiet as the trains are.
see if you bring it down and you get the.
I had escape. So over time, you're going to see more and more of those double trains on the track being tested as part of the testing and commissioning phase. With respect to the vehicles, I'm happy to report that the final vehicle for stage one is underway. This picture is about a week old or so. So that's the cab on the right, and then the main body of the vehicle being assembled. That completes the full assembly of the entire fleet for stage one. Now I'm going to take you on our tour from east to west, and the strategy that RTG is using is they're completing stations starting at the far end at Blair and working towards the core. And like a house in its final stages, you're seeing all the fit and finish work occurring, important elements. And if you go back to 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, now we got our CTV folks giving me feedback. When you go back 5 years ago, you saw pictures of all those important amenities that you endorse as part of this build. And while we're building a rail system, we're really building a fully integrated system with MUPs, with cycling facilities, with great connectivity throughout your community, with artwork and all those amenities. And incrementally, you're going to see more and more of that as part of the finish. So this is, excuse me, some of these cycling facilities. There's going to be trees planted in there. And when you go inside a Blair station, you see the finished ceiling work that's being completed. And then also you get into some of the key safety and security elements. This is a roll-down gate that closes when the station's not in service, after hours and so forth. And then if you look to the ceiling tiles, you see cameras, and there's a final pane of glass that's going to go in on the left-hand side there. Again, some finished products within the Serval station. You really start to get a sense of how open these stations are once you peel away all the protective plywood that was on those stairs and so forth, and the glass on both sides and on the ceilings of that platform that provides weather protection. Tremblay Station, final glazing going in on some of those lengthy panels. The ceilings are almost complete, and then the station's elevators are fully enclosed with glass, and there's the decorative shrouds on the top. Saint-Laurent, nearing completion, porcelain tiles on the right-hand side. That is that nice finish compared to if you were to go to some of the lower-cost tunnel finishes where you just have concrete. You have that great material on the right-hand side. You have the next train's stop announcement overhead, cameras, speakers, and those panels where all the conduits are hidden will have the wayfinding sign for the direction and the stations. Happy to report that faregate installations have moved in. This again is part of that final fit and finish. So you see the lighting levels, you see the porcelain tiles on the right, cameras, and then the faregates. That took about not even 2 days to install those because every single station has all the bases and pre-installed, the conduit, and all of the electrical mechanical feeds required for that to accept those faregates. So they're working in the western corridor. Saint Laurent is complete. They're moving, I believe, next to Serval and then Blair. Along with those faregates are your integrated fare vending equipment. A reminder, these are probably one of the best in North America, and that screen, anytime you have any question relating to anything on OC Transpo, you push that button and a live agent will greet you and can answer any question from fare to where you should be heading or what train to take, what bus to take, and any question. You can buy a Presto card there, you can load up, you can buy a day pass, multiple passes, every single type of fare medium that you need, and then also answer your questions. You can top up your fare card and so forth. Herdman Station is receiving a lot of the final glazing. You see the elevators enclosed and the top of the elevators with the decorative features, and also the partitions on the exterior side. And then if you look at the concrete structure, that is getting wrapped in that final silver metal finish. With the faregates come this iconic wayfinding sign, which you will see probably next month, a lot of the finishing work getting done. It is your O, which is symbolic. It's every single station will have this, and that is a white porcelain backlit with LED lighting. And where that piece of white porcelain is absent, there's going to be a big O, a red O, which you will see lit up at nighttime hours and obviously during the day. And then those two black pods are where the fare vending equipment goes in. So it's important for wayfinding, but also very strategically thought out that when you go into a station, you look to the right, and there's always fare equipment, fare vending machines if you need a fare. All of that's been mapped out from a customer journey perspective and been tested in the market. This is Lee's Station, and the reason I show you that is that right steel framing, that's what houses that big O, the backlighting, and then those two pods that you see there is the equipment, slots for the fare vending equipment. University of Ottawa Station, there's landscaping going on. You've seen we close that bus lane periodically. That's to get the final glazing on the outside of that station. They're doing interlock there. You'll see railings and final finish work being done in the next couple of days. Excuse me. Rideau Station. This is the station that has the most significant amount of work. It looks very packed. That's a strategic move by RTG. They have loaded that station up before they close the tunnel with equipment and material. So if you were to go into that station, it's a very crowded and busy spot. That's by design. They have advised us they are working 24/7 in that tunnel, or in that portion of the station in the tunnel. And also they are going, they're double shifting in some of the other locations. So I know one of the questions has been, why is it after 4 o'clock you don't see activity at some of the above ground stations? I can tell you that Rideau Station is 24/7, and some of the other locations they're double shifting to make sure that they get all the civil work done. Some extra shots of Rideau Station on the right hand side that'll encase some art for a future date. Parliament Station, what's going on here is the final landscaping, and that station will be closed up very shortly with glazing and doors. And then also a reminder that a lot of our partners are doing great work to their buildings. So this is the Mogard building. They're fixing up their entrance, and other locations where we've integrated into their buildings. They're leveraging LRT, so this is driving investment and also great looking facilities and facades like the Rideau Centre. Underneath Parliament Station, so again a lot of finishing work. The steel railing you see in the middle, that's both semi-decorative but also it's a security measure so that people don't traverse those tracks anytime. Lion Station, that I'm showing you a vent shaft, not that it's very attractive, but it's a critical piece of infrastructure, and people were wondering why it was taking so much time in this corridor. Those are critical elements for exhaust of the tunnel. You see those in Montreal, New York City, and other places where they have underground infrastructure. And what's going on here is the final landscaping around the vent shaft. Lion Station, in terms of finishing work, about 85% of the porcelain tile is down, which you see on the floor. And then those columns, again, some great architectural features. Those gaps that you see there will be LED lighting. The ceiling, you could imagine how boring that ceiling would be if it was just straight. The architect has configured it so it undulates, and it's going to be very attractive once the final finishings are on there shortly. Pimisi Station, that's progressing well. The elevators are almost complete, and they're doing glazing work throughout that station, both on railings and the elevators and the exterior walls. This is another shot of Pimisi Station, the platform. So you saw Blair and Sayreville, how complete those are. This is getting the final conduit fed through. And again, it's an integrated architectural design, so everything is hidden. You will not see conduit, loose wires throughout the station. It's a very clean finish that will last the test of time. The overhead hanging brackets, that's lighting, security, signage, speakers, and then there's glazing that goes over top so that our customers are weather protected. Bayview Station, this picture is about a week old or so. I can tell you those tarps are off. The elevators are almost completed in terms of glazing, and the rooftops are about to receive the shrouds that cover those big boxes on the top. Bayview, this is an interesting shot in that your Trillium line, if you look to the back, that is the Trillium line train. This is an extension of that track that brings it right into the Bayview station, so it's fully integrated, so those customers will get off the Trillium train and they're inside the Bayview station. And then what happens here is everything gets integrated, so the MUPs get completed, the station platform gets completed, and soon that train will be pulling into that station, and you'll have a multimodal connection from the diesel line to the electrified rail. And a reminder that the developers to the left of that are building a bridge connected right into that system so that they have a Trinity development, so they have a fully integrated station into LRT. So again, it's not just a mobility project, it's also leveraging a lot of your overarching council policies on development and an uplift that you wanted. Tunney's Pasture, lots of work being done here on electrical and mechanical. Things you don't see, they're behind the scenes. Off to the right, there's a bunch of electrical rooms and control rooms that they're working on. And they're getting ready to do the final glazing both on the upper concourse and through the customer waiting areas. Public art, can't say enough about this. You're starting to see it pop up throughout the stations. I know the mayor tweeted out Pimisi, the eel was installed last week. It's a beautiful piece of artwork. Serval Station has the trees. Blair Station has the art hanging on the side of the walls. So you're starting to see that throughout your network. The maintenance and storage facility, we've had some questions about what's the construction activity at the maintenance and storage facility, and you know, a lot of people have asked, well, does the delay in stage 1 have any impact on stage 2? Absolutely not. You've awarded stage 2 vehicle construction, and you've also awarded stage 2 expansion of the storage and maintenance facility. That is where you're going to be building your vehicles. So all that activity that you're seeing there is for stage 2. In addition to that, that's where they assemble the vehicles, they do testing and commissioning, and they also maintain the fleet, which is in test mode right now. Once that construction is completed and we move into revenue service, that's where all the cleaning, the inspection, the maintenance, and the storage of all the 34 vehicles for stage 1 is done, and a portion of stage 2 also. It's the headquarters for the administration related to the O-Train Confederation line, and it's the assembly for stage 2. You own that building, that is your asset, just like the rail corridor. They have a 30-year maintenance program associated with that and the vehicles. In the last meeting, Mr. Mayor, Chair Blais asked for some look ahead in terms of winter operations, so we've prepared a few slides. We've met with the new general manager of RTM, Rideau Transit Maintenance Group, and just a reminder, once Rideau Transit Group is completed their construction, it moves through a 30-year maintenance contract with RTM. He's a seasoned professional, he's got lots of rail experience, and with respect to the question about winter operations, there's been a number of extensive weather preparedness meetings with OC Transrail for about 3 years. There's going to be ongoing communication throughout all events like we do with our other modes of transit. They are leveraging the great weather resources that we have in public works so that they can do forecast-based mitigation, and they will do things like other properties do, where we'll operate trains during heavy storms throughout the evening hours to make sure that snow buildup and ice buildup is minimized. And then a reminder that we have an integrated control center, so we see every train, we see every system live in our control center, as does RTM. There, you may see in the coming months some testing of some vehicles out on the track. They have bought brand new equipment for the winter maintenance, everything from overhead catenary equipment to snowblower, sweeping vehicles that you see here. And there is a weather assessment plan that was done on wind and snow throughout the corridor, so they know if there's any hot spots where to spend extra time and resources. There's also our large network of cameras, which we will use for operations and maintenance during weather events leading up to them, and also as we phase out of them. There are snow melting cables and tracing cables in key locations along the platforms and stairways to keep it clear of ice and snow, so our platforms are heated. And then this question comes up, what about the escalators and the elevators? There will be regular escalator and elevator cleaning and proactive maintenance, particularly in the winter months where tracking of salt and small pea stone accumulation is problematic. So in closing, Mr. Mayor, the things we're monitoring with RTG, we're continuing to have very good dialogue with them. Their new director, who is well in place right now, continues to focus on achieving November 2nd. The Rideau station is an area that both they and we are monitoring very aggressively. Those two western stations, Tunney's and Bayview, we're keeping a close eye on those. I can't say enough about the end-to-end system verification that I've talked to you about in the past, everything from fire alarms to cameras to passenger systems. The fare gates and the ticket vending machines are underway now. I was pleased to see that that started, and our strategy of testing them out on the Trillium line and then rolling them out in Confederation line seems to have worked very, very well, so we'll continue to monitor that. The computer-based train control system that I walked you through last meeting is the thing that we're keeping our eye on very, very closely. They have to get to a maturity level that minimizes the number of issues and things that they need to deal with. So that is being focused on the eastern alignment. So those pictures of those trains in the video was all out in the east. and then they have to move to the western alignment and through the tunnel. We will need to see the end-to-end testing that I've talked about before from Blair to Tunney's, and then full operation of all trains in CBTC mode. And we continue to work with RTG to see that they're adhering to the November 2nd RSA date. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes the presentation.
Great, thank you. That was very thorough. Good to see the progress on the stations. Just one question. The seniors who get free transit on Wednesdays, how will they go through the Fairgate system? They don't have a pass now, do they? It's just the person tells the driver they're over 65?
That's all coded as part of the system and their cards, and then there's also the workaround. If they're stuck, they press that button, the attendant can see them, and if they don't have a card, we will let them through the Fairgate. So there's a structured process and there's also a workaround.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Councillor Deans?
Thank you for the presentation. I must say, your monthly attendance here is really painting, I think, a graphic picture for us of how the magnitude of this project. Like, it's huge, and there's so much going on. But I must say, if I was taking possession of a home and it was in a state of readiness, I'd be really worried about my November 2nd closing date. So I'm just wondering where your confidence level is. I think I've been asking you this every month, but both in terms of the construction side and the systems integration side.
So with every month and every week or day that goes by, and what I look for is incremental movement in the right direction. We are seeing that. The new director that has been put in place, I will give RTG a lot of credit. The shift that they did is they really moved, and you can tell by the pictures, from construction, heavy civil, to system testing and commissioning. Rupert, that's his name, he has a lot of experience in this regard. He's commissioned lines before. He has brought resources to the table that have done testing and commissioning. He made it very, very clear when he met with Mr. Cripps and I the first week that he has one mandate, and that is to get to November 2nd. And I can assure you that I made it crystal clear to him that I don't like surprises, that if they have any concerns about not getting to November 2nd, myself and Mr. Kanalakis need to know. And to date, their position continues to be they're achieving November 2nd. But I will not wait for October to tell you we're not making November 2nd if that's the case. The oversight, the resources, the support that we've had from the integrated city team is unrelenting, and to date RTG continues to say that they're going to achieve November 2nd. I can tell you your strategy and the P3 that you awarded is working, because May 25th has come and gone, and now they are being funded by their parent companies, and they need to get to November 2nd. And I know some people will say, well, they'll compromise on quality. They won't, because they have a 30-year concession that they make very significant profit margins. So if they give us a clunky system, they'll pay for it during the 30 years, and they won't do that. And so the systems, that's why I'm taking the time to show you the quality and the effort they're putting into that. There's a lot of skin in the game for them during the build, and there's a lot of skin in the game for them during the 30-year concession period. And so they need to bring us, and we've been very, very clear on all those parameters. You're going to give us the system we paid for at the service level, the 11,000 people per hour per direction on opening day, and it has to be reliable and continuously reliable throughout that period.
You talked about systems integration last month, and having more concern about all of those systems talking to each other than the construction side. So is that still your concern, that systems integration could be the Achilles heel?
System integration is the thing to watch, and again, that short video that I showed you about, that's another incremental step in that direction. So you have coupled vehicles together. That looks very easy in the picture, but those two trains need to talk to each other, so that's what they're testing out there. The train that's parked out at Tunney's pasture, that I know we've had some people tweeting, why is there a train sitting out there and a security guard? It's because that train is talking to the system at the control center in Tunney's, one of those units in there. So we're starting to see a lot of good progress in that regard. As you get through various levels of maturity of the system testing, there's level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once you as you incrementally go through those levels of maturity, the number of issues are exponentially less. So when you go from 1, while you have X number of issues, you go to 2, it's not cut by half, it's actually exponentially less, sometimes 3 or 4 times less issues. And Rupert and his team are moving through that systematically with the right resources. Talus is at the table. They've brought more resources to it. That's the folks that have built the CBTC system. And so we're seeing all the right indicators. As I said last month, can I guarantee you? Absolutely. You don't want someone sitting in this chair saying they're going to guarantee you that.
We're just trying to get a sense. What level are we at currently?
Well, the major update this month is you have multiple trains out in the corridor. You have a coupled train out in the corridor, and the systems are talking to each other. You said
there's level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Are we in level 1?
He's producing a report for Mr. Cripps and I. We will know better next month where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Conseil Municipal.
Just a quick question on cycling facilities. I noticed that there is quite a bit of cycling facilities. Will there be security or security cameras so that people feel safe that when they do put their bikes there all day sort of thing, that when they come back, the bikes will still be there?
Yes, we have thousands of cameras out there.
Okay, thank you.
Well, listen, thank you very much. It's great to see the progress each meeting that is coming with this project, and I want to thank you, Mr. Manconi and Mr. Cripps, because you've certainly been keeping the pressure on our partners, and I think that's needed to ensure that we meet our public's expectation. There's a lot of people I see almost every day on Twitter, people filming the trains coming. There's a real sense of excitement that they're moving, and we obviously are as a community looking forward to the date of November 2nd and making sure that we meet that date. So we appreciate all of your good work, and thank you for the presentation. Next is the refugee resettlement update. I asked Councillor Kakish to bring forward a report on the work that we have done with the Syrian refugees, and I want to thank him publicly for his efforts. He's been to many different community gatherings and meetings with everyone from Refugee 613 to Catholic Immigration Center and other not-for-profit and community groups. So I think we have a PowerPoint, so we'll ask him to get ready for that, and then we'll be followed by Ottawa 2017, final update. I see the recently retired Guy Laflamme, who is with us, and we thank him and his team.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning to colleagues and everyone here. I'm pleased to provide a update on the refugee resettlement efforts. As many of you know, in the fall of 2015, Mayor committed the City of Ottawa as a facilitator of the community Syrian refugee resettlement and appointed me as a special liaison for refugees. This decision was in line with our strategic priority of supporting the community's efforts to integrate refugees in the city's municipal immigration strategy for 2016-2018, approved by Council in April 2016. This was also a very important decision because research indicates that more support received by refugees in the first years of arrival, the more successful their integration is over time. And the early indicators are confirming this correlation. As a city special liaison for refugees, I've been asked to provide a summary of the collective efforts on resettlement in Ottawa. I'm extremely proud of the work we have accomplished as a city on this important endeavor. And in my role as special liaison for refugees, I was able to meet with newcomers from Syria and speak to them in their language, and work closely with our various settlement agencies across the city. And in fact, just on the weekend, I was in Emmanuel United Church in Alta Vista, where a group of local residents in Riverside South did a group of 5 to sponsor Hani Dima and their 15-month-old baby Paul as well. And so it's been very very rewarding and very gratifying to see so many of our residents come together, because we know without the community and residents of the city, we wouldn't have been able to integrate the number of Syrian newcomers over the short period of time that we've seen. Ottawa, in terms of context, Ottawa has a long history of welcoming immigrants and refugees, and I appreciate and applaud how welcoming our community has been. The Syrian refugee resettlement effort across Canada began in late fall of 2015, and Ottawa has a strong pre-existing network of settlement and community agencies who provide services to all newcomers and immigrants, including additional programs or supports tailored specifically to Syrian or other refugee populations. The city's efforts leverage this capacity and expertise. Arrivals in Ottawa. This slide shows some of the arrival data for our city. I would like to speak to a couple of components here which are highlighted, and you'll see the major difference between the two charts. One speaks specifically to Syrian refugees and one speaks to refugees in general, and you see the numbers between November of 2015 and February 2018. Ottawa welcomed 2,740 Syrian refugees, which constitutes approximately 617 households, and 63% of who came as government-assisted refugees, known as GARs. So 4,685 resettled refugees from all countries of origin arrived in Ottawa between January 2015 and February 2018. So recognizing that the reporting is slightly different time frames, you'll still note that about half of the refugees arriving are from Syria. In terms of the federal government and immigration levels and targets for 2016-2020, those targets for Canada between 2017 and 2020 show a small increase in the total number of immigration, between 300,000 to 340, including protected persons and refugees, 40 to 48,000. These targets are significantly lower than the actual levels experienced in 2016, as shown in the highlighted sections. In 2016, over 58,000 protected persons and refugees arrived in Canada, which represents about 20% of all immigrants, compared to the 43,000 planned for 2018, which represents just over 13.9%. The 2017 and 2020 levels plan also include a greater proportion of people arriving as privately sponsored refugees. In 2016, privately sponsored refugees accounted for just over 30% of all refugees, and it planned for 2018 to be just over 40%. With regards to city services and supports, should be made clear that the city does not directly provide any programs specific to refugees and immigrants, whether Syrian or from other countries. However, many are served through existing programs open to eligible residents, and as such, services to refugees are part of the regular ongoing operations. The ways that the city does support refugees and immigrants are highlighted on the slide. Programs and services that are available to all eligible residents, but that are tailored to respond to unique populations needs, such as immigrants and newcomers, include 311 language lines, which have translators available to converse in over 170 languages. By building a workforce that is representative of the community it serves, including hiring newcomers, providing training to staff to help them better understand the needs of immigrants, as well as recognize the skills, experience, and knowledge that immigrants bring to the community, and systematically coordinating our services and strategic initiatives with partners such as post-secondary institutions. Providing funding with current municipal mandate. In 2018, community funding invested just under $1 million in 9 agencies and programs that serve immigrants. And leadership through the appointment of myself, as well as convening community leaders to respond to the Syrian refugee crisis on the Mayor's Task Force for Syrian Refugees. And of course, we know the fundraising efforts of United for Refugees Fund, which raised about $1 million. Concretely, some examples of the city's efforts over the past 3 years include the Mayor's Working Group on Refugee Resettlements and meeting with local MPs and MPPs who have played a big role in assisting and getting funding for various programs. Hosting or co-hosting a variety of events, including the Mayor's Public Forum on Refugee Resettlement, which was the first step on October 1st, 2015. We had a welcome event for Syrian newcomers on May 28th of 2016. We've also hosted career fairs for the newcomers, including the Pathways to Employment career fair on June 16, 2016, where we saw a lot of businesses from the local community step up and offer to open their shops to employ Syrian newcomers. And of course, World Refugee Day event on June 20th of 2016. Ottawa Public Health organized immunization and dental clinics, as well as assessments and other health services in the initial period of the settlement. Parks, Rec, Cultural, and Facility Services staff worked with Refugee 613 to build a volunteer management system. And I know OC Transpo as well hosted various clinics to teach newcomers how to use our bus systems. With regards to requests for assistance in terms of refugee access to cities administered programs, the bulk of requests is around financial support. So Ontario Works, as many of you know, is administered by Community and Social Services, but is funded by the provincial government. Resettled refugees and refugee claimants are eligible for Ontario Works, assuming they meet the program criteria. As of November 2017, 325 Syrian refugee households applied for Ontario Works. This represents about 54% of all Syrian refugees that came to Ottawa during this time period. Emergency shelters, less than 5 families required an emergency shelter, and I've been advised it is only for short periods of time. This speaks to the great work that the community did in ensuring the proper support and resources for those families. While the purpose was to provide an update on the Syrian efforts, I thought it was appropriate as well to touch on some of the current trends that we're seeing. There have been some media attention about the pressure primarily in Montreal and Toronto. We know some other cities are experiencing some increases in demands as well. Here in Ottawa, we saw increased demand for emergency shelter placement beginning in the summer of 2017 due to refugee claimants originating in the United States, and the demand was steady from June to November 2017 when it leveled off. However, the demand has since increased in April of 2018, and we are operating within our current resources. Housing Services is monitoring the requests and trends, and we're also participating in regular discussions at the provincial level and with other cities related to border response, hearing process, and understanding the capacity and demand available. In terms of next steps, the city staff continue to work in close partnership with community agencies to monitor trends and collectively address emerging issues such as mental health and employment. Representatives from Community and Social Services as well as other departments participate on the local planning tables, Refugee 613 and the Ottawa Local Immigration Partnership. And in closing, I would like to acknowledge once again the tremendous community effort that has taken place over the last couple of years. To showcase a great collaboration across partners resulting in positive outcomes for our new residents and ultimately our welcoming community. It took many partners to have the impact that we saw in Ottawa, and I want to congratulate Refugee 613, OLIP for their leadership role in coordinating and supporting the community's resettlement effort. We are fortunate that Ottawa has a strong pre-existing network of settlement agencies, and I want to acknowledge the Catholic Centre for Immigrants and all of the LASI or local agencies serving immigrants partners for delivering excellent service to refugees over many months of extremely high demand, assisting them with securing housing and providing the necessary supports. Addressing health concerns and enrolling children in school was often a key first step for individuals and families arriving, and community agencies such as the Community Health and Resource Center and the school boards played an essential role in meeting those initial needs as well as connecting individuals to the broader community. Thousands of residents also came forward to support the resettlement efforts, whether as private sponsors, donors, or volunteers. So on behalf of the city and the mayor, I'd like to thank everyone who played and continues to play a role in helping newcomers settle and build a life here in Ottawa. And that concludes the presentation, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you very much. Questions, Councillor El-Shantiri?
Just a quick question. First of all, thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Mayor, for the support to the refugee. But is the organization you're working with, are they keeping track of people returning since the war almost to some degree, somebody can say, has stopped? So do we have a record of people returning home?
I don't have a number off the top of my head, but I think we would be able to get that perhaps from, Carl Nicholson at the Catholic Immigration Center. But as far as I know, and I don't know if Claire has any numbers, but as far as I know, the majority are staying here.
Are staying? Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that was my question as well, so thank you. So thank you very much, Councillor, and to our staff, Janice and Clara, who helped support this initiative. What struck me was how the community really opened its arms and its heart and its wallets to help these people in desperate need. And while I'm not trying to sugarcoat the fact there's still some real challenges ahead for language barriers and employment opportunities, I'll just tell you one story. I was at I think it was the child care fundraising brunch at Easter in Councillor DeRuse's ward, and it was at the arena, and I was just watching this hockey game, and this hockey dad came over to me and proudly said that a young Syrian boy who was 8 years old scored the winning goal for his team at the championship. And I thought, boy, here's a kid who probably obviously never skated before, is really integrating into Canada's national sport, and you're making friends along the way. So thank you for the report, and we appreciate the good work. We know that we still have work to do, particularly as we see the challenges at the Montreal border and the impact it may have on our community. So thank you for that. Our next presentation is Ottawa 2017 final update. This will be basically items 3 and 4. Michael Crockett, President and CEO of Ottawa Tourism, and Guy Laflamme, who, as I mentioned, he's here as a volunteer now because he's officially retired, and we welcome him back and thank him for what was quite a remarkable year for our city and our country. So we'll get them settled up, and then the next item after this is the Brownfields Grant Program application. There's no delegations for the library one, so we'll go to the next one that has delegations. Oh, sorry, that you're asking. Yeah. Okay, so Mr. Crockett, Monsieur Laflamme, bienvenue, welcome.
Bonjour, Monsieur le maire. Bonjour l'ensemble des membres du Conseil municipal et merci pour cette opportunité de vous faire part des résultats d'Ottawa 2017. Avant d'aborder les résultats, j'aimerais encore une fois remercier le maire Watson et l'ensemble du Conseil municipal pour votre incroyable appui tout au long de l'année et pour la planification d'Ottawa 2017 et particulièrement le conseiller Cloutier, conseiller Fleury, qui était coprésident de l'implication de la Ville d'Ottawa sur les célébrations d'Ottawa 2017. Merci également au personnel de la Ville d'Ottawa, Steve Kanalakis, Dan Brisebois, Amanda Mullen, qui ont fait un travail exceptionnel pour nous appuyer dans la mise en œuvre des célébrations. Et un merci tout particulier à la police d'Ottawa, le fait qu'on a terminé l'année avec les millions de personnes qui ont assisté à nos événements sans qu'il y ait aucun incident est vraiment un témoignage de la qualité du service de police de la Ville d'Ottawa. Et merci à l'ensemble des gens qui sont ici et même un merci particulier aux médias qui nous ont appuyés pour faire en sorte que les gens soient au courant de tout ce qui était offert dans le cadre de nos célébrations. So just to start, just to remind you about some of the high moments of 2017, allow us to show you the wrap-up video that we did of our celebration. Video. Okay, the beauty of technology. I prefer to have those challenges now rather than last year.
Today, we're celebrating Canada 150!
What was Ottawa 2017? There were fire-breathing creatures loved by 750,000 fans. There were people in the sky and others deep underground. There were flying cars, flying ships, and flying hockey players. There was classical music and epic rock shows. Ottawa 2017 was over 200 events, 3,100 hours of big, immersive program, reaching millions of people, creating memories to last a lifetime, transforming our city, inspiring a generation, and igniting our future. 2017 was Canada's big year, and it happened right here, in Ottawa.
So I hope this video is generating as much goosebumps on your skin as it is on mine. I think it's still surreal that we managed to pull it off and to implement every page of the 400-page business plan that I wrote in the summer of 2014. Going back to the objectives we were given by the City of Ottawa and Ottawa City Council to report on what we've achieved, we were asked to secure 100% of the financing required. The objective was $20 million. Remind you that we started with a annual budget of $300,000 a year when I started in May 2014. We managed to generate a total offerings of more than $40 million. Half of that money came from private sector and self-generated revenues with the sales of tickets for some of our events. And this was as a result of securing over 400 partners, regional, national, international organizations. We were asked to produce a minimum of 10 new major events. We generated over 200 new events over the course of the year, 3,100 hours of programming. That's the equivalent of 8.5 hours per day, with a team, may I remind you, of 18 people. So things like Continuum, which allowed us to showcase Confederation Line, but also position Ottawa as a technology city. And we were finalists in South by Southwest, and we won an award as the best multimedia event against thousands of organizations around the world. The success of Picnic on the Bridge, celebrating the unification of what used to be called Upper and Lower. Ottawa Welcomes the World. We were aiming for 25 embassies. We ended up with 97 embassies came on board for the event. Miwate, how we honored Indigenous people, big success, and also giving people the opportunity to access Chaudière Falls. Canada's Table, which was a sellout in 2 seconds. La Machine, it was the biggest success of the year, but it also not only allowed to create an amazing community spirit, but to showcase the beauty of architecture of downtown Ottawa, and Red Bull Crashed Ice, where 200,000 brave people faced the minus 1,000 degree temperature to celebrate our passion for ice and hockey. And Agri 150, we had 20 different artistic culinary events in rural Ottawa to celebrate the fact that 90% of our land is rural, and we showcase the beauty and the quality of products that we offer in rural Ottawa. We were asked to put in place at least 2 new events in each ward. We managed to generate 107 events in 23 wards, and that's not counting what we did as part of the Juno Awards, and just aspects that are not as well known about some of our accomplishments, more social components of our accomplishments. We promoted diversity at a time where there were all kinds of racial tensions around the world, with the success of Ottawa Welcomes the World and the partnership we did with OLIP. We celebrated Indigenous culture. People from Indigenous communities didn't want to necessarily the 150th, but they saw this as an opportunity to further educate people about the mistakes made in history, and that's what we did by including them in pretty much every single major event. So from December 31st, Junior Awards, Miwate, etc. Promote agriculture and local products. And again, most of those events, the 20 events, were a sell-off, and we will be repeating some of them moving forward. Positioning Ottawa as a technology city, as we did with Miwate, with Continuum. Being able to feature local talent with the Junior Awards, with Inspiration Village, La Machine, where all the talent were local. We managed to engage over 1,000 bands, 1,000 artists from our community. Celebrating youth, all 4 school boards were involved, all colleges and universities. Enrich our social fabric. We worked with the Ottawa Mission. We worked with different charity and food banks. We created a meeting place to foster an enhanced level of pride and community spirit, and to being able to engage all levels of our community, BIAs, community centers, schools, chambers of commerce, volunteers, arts, cultural organization. I challenge you to come up with any name of organization who were not part of the celebration. So it was not Ottawa 2017 celebration, it was the entire Ottawa community output which generated this event. We painted the town Ottawa 2017. The new pageantry program that we created will benefit whenever we host major events in the future. We wanted to make Ottawa the hub of the 150th celebration, and I think that's what we accomplished with the renewed sense of image and the prestige brand that we created. So proud that we won against Montreal 375th, despite the fact that they had way more resources than we had. We won the award of the best campaign, promotional campaign in the country, awarded by the CTC, and the fact that I'm being invited in Korea, in Holland, in the United States, all across Canada and Brazil to present the results of Ottawa 2017, and I'll be the keynote speaker for the closing of the International Festival and Events Association Conference, I think is a sign that we did something right. And now in terms of numbers, the great collaboration we had with Ottawa Tourism, Michael will tell you about quantitative aspects of our results.
There's no question that Guy and his team delivered, and our team at Ottawa Tourism is extremely grateful to Guy and his team for delivering, because it gave us an opportunity, but more than an opportunity, an obligation to take advantage of those events and the eyeballs that were on Ottawa in 2017. And so our team really worked hard to make sure that we took full advantage of this once in a lifetime opportunity to promote Ottawa and to make sure that we were delivering the results that were expected of us. And we worked great with Guy's team, very integrated on the marketing and communication side of things, and the results were extreme. 11 million visitors, that's a record by any metric that we have to measure. 11 million people came to Ottawa, 8.8% on 2016, which itself was a record year. Canadian visitors up 8.7%, US visitors up 7.8%, and maybe most telling, international visitors up 10.9%. So some of the things that Guy's team was doing really did resonate with international visitors, which is exciting. And when you think about the ROI for what Ottawa 2017 was able to do in our community, $2.3 billion were spent in our community by visitors in 2017, which is up 10.3%. That's an incredible amount of additional spending, almost $250 million more in spending than was done in the previous year. So, and that doesn't say anything about what locals did and the impact on locals in Ottawa as well. So very, very incredible positive impact for Ottawa. Some of the highlights from our team taking advantage of the focus on Ottawa. Our social media numbers grew incredibly. There's incredible conversations taking place about Ottawa during 2017. Our website blew all previous records out of the water in terms of people coming to find out information about Ottawa as well. So almost 5 million views for our website. The media coverage reached over 270 million people. in 2017, including one of the highlights of the year was the piece in the New York Times, 36 Hours in Ottawa. But also we reached into the UK. The Guardian focused on Ottawa. The Los Angeles Times with an award-winning article calling Ottawa cool with a capital C, which really goes to what Guy was talking about changing the way that people think about Ottawa. Le Soleil talking about Ottawa. Vogue talking about a restorative weekend away in Ottawa. The Montreal Gazette talking about the food scene in Ottawa. Again, changing the way that people think about our community. And in terms of meetings and conventions, it was a record year for our community. More meetings, more conventions here, and more international conventions. We moved up from 33rd spot in North America in terms of international conventions up to 14th in 2017. So we are doing the right things to attract those big events. And not all of them are international. Last year, of course, we hosted the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and also Association of Municipalities of Ontario, two really significantly large events here in Ontario. We thank the city for partnering with us on both of those. Of course, the sporting events that took place here, it would take far too long to go through all of them. A couple of big ones ending the year with the Grey Cup, of course, and the NHL 100 Classic, but just dozens and dozens more of national championships and international events as well. And one of the questions we get is, what was the full impact of 2017? And right now, we've just launched an economic impact study, and in a few months, we'll have the results of what the tourism impact is in Ottawa. So we know the approximate was spent here, we know the approximate number of visitors, and we're going to get some more detailed information in the coming months as well. And the mayor has announced these new funds that are facilitated through the municipal accommodation tax. This is one of the great legacies of Ottawa 2017 as well, that we'll have the ability to invest in events and invest in more conferences and conventions and to invest in new innovative ideas through the Destination Development Fund. So we're grateful to the city for having the confidence in Ottawa tourism to be able to do that for the community as well. The question we get the most often is, what's next in terms of the legacy of the 2017 events. And so certainly Ottawa Welcomes the World looks like it will be coming back over the July long weekend. We have already transitioned hundreds of volunteers from Ottawa 2017 into an ongoing volunteer pool for future events and current events. We have also just finished the updating of the Host 150 program, which is a frontline customer service training program, which is now available for tourism businesses and members in Ottawa. In the stages of working out what the agri events will be for the rural parts of Ottawa, but that is going to take place again this year for sure. The Ignite 150 will be integrated now into our Destination Development Fund, so there's opportunities for funding to support those innovative, crazy ideas that Guy's team really fostered in 2017. We're still working on Miwate and on Picnic on the Bridge. Sky Lounge may be one of those ones that now just has a private sector solution where someone can come and sell tickets for dinner in the sky. And one that may not come back in the short term anyways is the Global Rallycross. The company that was operating that has become insolvent, so we're not working with them anymore at this point in time. And of course, the two biggest ones that we always get asked about are, what about La Machine and what about Red Bull Crash Day? Happy to say both of those are very much in the works in terms of the future opportunities to bring them back. 2020 with Red Bull Crashed Ice is the most likely year for that to come back as it makes its circuit through Canadian markets, and we're in the folks at Red Bull regularly, and thanks to Guy, we've had the right introductions to La Machine, and we've been working closely with them and with the French MC over the last few months to work on what is the right way and the right timing for the next iteration of a La Ottawa relationship. So we're excited about the future for those events, and we know the impact that they had in our community in 2017. And I think with that,
en terminant, on veut vous laisser avec des images de La Machine. Un documentaire est en voie de production par une firme de la Chine. Les images sont vraiment des plus spectaculaires et ça vous permettra d'avoir une appréciation des foules qu'on a générées. La Machine a été la plus importante production artistique dans l'histoire d'Ottawa. Lorsqu'on a dit que 750 000 personnes y avaient assisté, c'est probablement en réalité plus près du 1 million. Le documentaire sera lancé à Ottawa. La première de la production sera lancée à Ottawa au début de l'automne parce que malheureusement le producteur a eu des problèmes cardiaques. Alors, voici un court extrait du trailer qui a été fait pour ce documentaire que l'on verra à Ottawa. Et vous savez, la production de la machine à Ottawa est maintenant la norme au niveau international. Je suis en communication avec les gens de Toulouse qui vont accueillir la machine en novembre, presque sur une base à chaque semaine, alors qu'ils veulent apprendre et s'inspirer du modèle qui a été développé à Ottawa. Alors encore une fois, merci Monsieur le maire, merci au Conseil municipal pour votre appui d'avoir rendu tout ça possible.
Wow, what a way to end the presentation. First of all, thank you, Guy. You know, I often tell the story when Guy came into me with all of these ideas. He said, we're going to put a spider on the Catholic Basilica, and then the dragon's going to fight the spider on the lawn of the Supreme Court. We're going to shut down Wellington Street for a dinner for 1,000. We're going to have Red Bull crashed ice next to the Châtelet. I thought he was on drugs the whole time. How can we possibly do all this? Every single thing that he promised, he delivered. And as you saw we'll see on item number 4, all of the funds were balanced out to net zero from the City of Ottawa, and you doubled the number of dollars received from other levels of government in the private sector. So bravo, we're very, very proud. Thank you very, very much, and enjoy your retirement. Thank you. And as well to Michael, your team were just fantastic, stepped up to the plate, and it was a great opportunity. I just wanted to mention one thing, and then we'll go to questions. One of the things I noticed about La Machine, I met so many people. I was down in the market and downtown every day for La Machine. I was mesmerized with it, like 750,000 other people. And I met so many people from suburban communities, Canada, Orleans, Barrhaven, that actually told me it was the first time they'd come downtown in a long time, because they'd always thought, you know, parking problems and so on. And they rediscovered or discovered new restaurants and new shops. And then the reverse of that, so many people from the urban core going out to suburban and rural Ottawa, in particular Suntech tomatoes, one of the pictures you showed. We always hear about Suntech tomatoes on the radio ads, but people had this beautiful course dinner amongst the tomato plants in the greenhouses in February. It was just magical. And we saw that with the Secret Eats program that went into rural Ottawa, and people were going to visit breweries and wineries that they had no idea existed. So I think it was a great way to get people from different parts of the city to discover their own city, you know, above and beyond the international and national tourists that came to us. Councillor Deans, question?
My question's actually number 4. Are we taking them all together, or?
Yeah, we can do that. Sure.
Okay, but maybe before I ask my question, I'll just say that it was a spectacular year, and it is amazing what you pulled off. And if I ever need a really good party planner, I think I know who to call. So what do you do for an encore, personally?
Live a simple and quiet life. I will be for the next few months traveling the world, as I have had all those invitations to share our success story. But beyond that, I just want to retire and spend time with my family and enjoy our place in the Magdalen Islands, as well as living in Ottawa, in Blackburn Hamlet.
A very well-deserved retirement, so thank you for all you did to showcase Ottawa. My question, I'm not sure who's going to answer this, but item number 4, it was silent on cost recovery for OPS services and EPS services from the federal government, and I just wondered if we have come to an agreement on cost recovery for emergency services with the federal government.
I think that's more of a staff question. Is Dan Brisebois or Steve?
Mr. Mayor, that particular topic is not actually directly related to the subject of this particular report, but I'll endeavor to talk to Mr. DeMonte and we'll have an answer to the council prior to council, if that's acceptable.
Okay. I mean, it was the 2017 final report, so I think it seems fair to ask if we managed cost recovery on our emergency services.
Well, I think on document 1 it shows the cash contributions in kind, and my understanding is that all of the bills have been paid to police and paramedic service, and it's reflected in the fact that it balanced 6 million and 6.002 income and 6.002 expenses. So the last board meeting, I think Mr. Cloutier, who's on the audit committee, we did receive confirmation that all of the bills have been paid.
That is correct, Mr.
From the federal government, did they reimburse us for the emergency services?
Well, we always get reimbursed for Canada Day. They gave us $5 million as part of their contribution. So I think I was understanding you were asking about the Ottawa police. They're all...
Because in terms of our, the services that we received from City of Ottawa services, Ottawa Police, and all other sectors, we paid probably in the order of $2 million in different services provided by the city, and we paid the same way as any external events would have paid. So those bills have all been paid, but in terms of federal government and services provided by the city to Canada Day, I'm not involved with that.
Okay, thank you.
And my understanding also is that any assets are not sold are the property now of Ottawa Tourism, like the light system and so on, but you sold a fair amount of everything from, I guess, fire extinguishers to wood.
Yep, to be able to balance our budget, everything was sold back. We managed to recover what we paid for the furniture, the very frugal furniture we had in our office, and all the equipment that we acquired for the productions.
Guy brought us a lot of printer paper. I appreciate that.
Est-ce qu'il y a des autres questions? No. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. So on item 4, which is the final report received. Okay, so our next item is item number 12, because we have members of the public to speak to that. And we have a presentation with Leanne Snedden and Richard Buchanan. So I think if we... You have a PowerPoint for this?
Yes.
I forgot to also, Guy did thank Jean Cloutier and Mathieu Fleury, who are council-appointed 2 co-chairs of 2017. They put a lot of effort into their responsibilities, and we thank them. I don't think they're here, but in absentia, thank them.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have Mr. Buchanan and Mr. James with me today. I'm going to provide some opening remarks and then turn the short presentation over to Mr. Buchanan. The old Domtar lands are the primary reason why cities develop brownfields programs. These are contaminated lands on a derelict site in the city's urban core. This truly is the poster child for a brownfield grant. Building on 2017 celebration presentation today, the city really does benefit in many ways from the new development. Build-out will create $750 million worth of assessed value. Currently, we are collecting $207,000 in property taxes. A few questions have come up asking whether this development would have gone ahead without this grant. This is a question, of course, for Windmill. However, I suspect this grant is at a minimum helping to speed up progress to make the vision of Zibi a reality. The reality for the city is increased taxes, which at full build-out, council will be collecting $18 million instead of $200,000 per year. Committee and council, if approved, will be making an investment with positive returns that are likely to begin to be realized in as early as 12 years. From a financial and urban development and environmental point of view, the admittedly $60 million grant is in the public interest. This is polluted land that has been underdeveloped for many years, and there are buildings with heritage value that will be repurposed. This site meets the goals of our planning policies. The question has also come up, why Zibi and not LeBreton Flats? LeBreton Flats is a federal government-owned NCC land, and the Brownfields program is not intended to fund any other levels of government. Zibi purchased these lands from Domtar, the holder of the lands for the past 100 years. The federal government had no control over these lands, so were not responsible for the contamination that took place. The cleanup of this site will make this development a dynamic part of the city's urban fabric and will contribute to our vision of making Ottawa the most livable mid-sized city in North America. Mr. Buchanan is now going to take you through a technical piece around some of the property ownership.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, committee members. Before you have a Brownsville application for 3 and 4 Booth Street, which is put forward by Windmill June Holdings Limited. Before you, the following is a plan showing the pre-development land ownership. And as indicated by the green areas, these were federally owned properties, but Domtar had long-term 9-year leases to use these lands. The black dashed areas replicates the Domtar land ownership outright. So actually to the top left, you'll notice the light gray lines, and that deals with Hydro Ottawa properties. This is the proposed development. The above plan shows the extent of the development being proposed. The green areas to the east and west ends of Chaudière Island are proposed parks, and they'll remain in NCC ownership. There's there's actually 1,121 condominium residential developments with mixed-use development of over 11,700 square meters of retail space and 66,500 square meters of office space. So this brownfield redevelopment application is the largest single request since the program started in 2007, but it should be the matter it replicates the intent, the full intent of the Brownsfield program in terms of every aspect. So the total estimated cost for the windmill to rehabilitate this and remediate the site is over $121 million. So therefore the estimated maximum grant eligible under the program is over $60 million. Part of that $60 million is development charge credits that makes up over $21 million, and that's included in the $60 million. So development charges don't start until building permits are actually issued, and rehab grants don't occur until there's an uplift in the property taxes. So there's an investment in the economy in terms of $360 million in construction value, and as Leanne had stated, the existing annual property taxes is $207,000, and after full build-out, it can be expected of $18 million per year present-day value. Okay. So, and that ends the presentation.
Questions? Councillor El Shantiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. Maybe so much to our staff and maybe to the treasurer. And I know this is a policy we have and about the cleanup, but let's see if the city didn't include or participate in the cleanup, what would that happen to the social housing component on that side?
The cost for the developer would be obviously higher, and in order to recoup those costs, most likely they would not be able to put affordable housing on the site. They would have to charge more for what they're going to build, so that would preclude, I would think, any type of affordable housing.
Can you just enlighten me, what will be the percentage of social housing in that development?
Mr. Mayor, the target for affordable housing is 7%. With 1,200 units, that equates to approximately 84 units of affordable housing.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Good question. Can I reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation, especially clearing up the issues around ownership in the federal government and that sort of piece. When you use the term target, does that mean that's where we'd like them to get or where they've committed to get?
Mr. Mayor, that is what they've committed to achieve.
Okay, thank you for that. This is a lot of money, obviously, and we've seen that there's a benefit to it. And in terms of tax revenue, and as Councillor Shantiri pointed out, there's going to be some positive impact in terms of the affordable housing that's going to be built on site as well. I do know that from talking to Mr. Willis, though, that other cities have different models about how they do this. For example, some have an overall cap for the whole program, not necessarily per project, but the whole program over a given term. Other cities look at different conditions, if you will, around. And again, I've talked to Mr. Willis, so maybe he can take this answer, but I'm assuming there's no objection if this committee was to direct you to do a review going into next term of our program, to come back with a report on how other cities are doing it and what suggestions you might have to not get rid of the program, because I think it does good work and helps us to take properties that otherwise wouldn't be done, but maybe give us some suggestions about cities do it and enhancements that we could do for our program. Is that a direction that you could accept today?
Mr. Mayor, like all of our funding programs, it's actually normal for us to do reviews at 5-year segments, and the fifth year would be coming up around the second term of the next council. We are also looking at starting a review of all of the economic development grant funding programs in the next term, just to assess where they're at and fine-tune and tweak them. So if committee were to give that direction, it'd be consistent with what we intended to put in our own work program.
I'm happy to give that direction. Thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you for that. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions on the financing of this. I take it the $60 million of approximately 50% of the cost because the owner, so this is going to cost over $120 million?
The grant is for up to $60 million, and just to clarify in terms of that figure, that's a maximum amount. When Windmill goes forward and actually performs all the remediation, the city only pays actual costs. So if they go above what has been estimated, they will not be compensated for that.
So this is a limit we're putting on it, but that's just 50% of what we expect they're going to have to pay.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, of that, the $21 million for the DCs surprised me because the treasurer told me we had a couple of years ago decided not to include DC revenue in this, and I'm wondering why it is this one, and whether we still have to do what I was told before. If we forgive DC money, then we have to budget within our budget to put that money in from city costs as a city cost because we need that money for DCs, for the future project. I think maybe the treasurer would be the best one to answer this, Mr. Mayor, because I talked to her about this a while back and was told that we had made a change that we were no longer including DCs.
We did make a change to the program, but this is a site that was grandfathered because they actually had their application in before we made the change. So there were a number of sites that we grandfathered, and they were allowed to continue under the old rules, where we are using development charges as one of the ways to pay them back for half of the work that they're undertaking. Yes, you have to, we've agreed through the planning committee, when you council exempts a property from having to pay a development charge, the city taxes make up the difference so that the DC accounts are not affected. You already have a base budget of $6 million a year, and we review it annually to determine if it's sufficient, and if it isn't, we actually put in a request to increase it in the year. So that account of $6 million right now would be what we would use to repay the $21 million in development charges, which council will be paid back to them over roughly a 20-year period.
It's a 20-year period, but the property tax exemption is just 10 years. I mean, the DCs are going to be needed before years if they're already in the bylaw.
We collect, but we only collect DCs when a building permit is taken out. So they will get reimbursed their DCs when the building permits are taken out. So you're correct. We need the DCs now. We'd love to get developers to prepay DCs, but that's not how it works. So it's as the developer comes in and drills a permit, which we expect to take place over a long period of time.
Right. So is there a time limit for that, of doing the DCs? Like if it goes on for 30 years, do we still do it for 30 years?
There is a time limit, and Mr. Buchanan can refresh me. Is it 10 or 20? It's 10. It's a 10-year period.
10 years.
So any building permits in the next 10 years would have that. After that, they would not be exempted anymore.
That's correct.
Thank you very much, Mr. Red. Just wanted to clarify that.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, that's per phase. So there's 5 phases of development, and each phase will have a 10-year horizon.
That's correct.
This is a total of 5 phases. Then that's 60 million is for. Okay, and I agree with what Councillor Eagle said. I think a review of this is probably warranted. It's been long enough. We have a lot of experience with it now. I know originally staff were going to give 100% reduction, and I kind of balked at that. And they looked at it again. We got to 50%, so they are paying, because they usually pay less for the land if it's contaminated. So it's a shared thing now, and I think that's the better way to go.
And Councillor Eglai's direction's been given to staff, so thank you. Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to, 2 things. On the affordable housing, the commitment, I take it then we've got that in writing. Can you just tell me the details of it in terms of the affordability aspects, how much will go to the 40th percentile, the 30th, and then the deep subsidy into the 20th percentile?
Mr. Mayor, that's probably a question better asked to the applicant. It's just they have a commitment to provide 7% for affordable housing on their development. I guess with respect to the affordable rents with respect to both the official plan and CMHC data, but probably the best person to through their delegation to answer that would be the applicant.
They're first up.
Okay, yeah, I'll ask that question then. Just back to the land ownership, and if we can go back to slide 2, I believe it was, and I'm not sure if this has changed between reports. I have 2 reports. One seems to have changed a bit, but on the one I'm looking at, page 30, it does show these parcels here, about 20% that are pre-development land ownership was NCC. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, it's the green that's on the plan here.
Okay. Roughly what, 20%, I guess?
Mr. Mayor, that would be a good estimate, yes.
And did staff ever make any attempt, or do we ever make any attempt when we're dealing with land that was either federally owned and or managed at some point to have them take responsibility for cleanup?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Brownfield program is not based from its initiation back in 2006 in the city seeking to recover from those who contaminated the land.
How do you see this as different than from Le Breton Flats?
Mr. Mayor, with the lands here, they were in what would be called fee simple ownership, so therefore the federal government was not responsible for, had or any control over the contamination that Domtar went forward with in their ownership of these lands. So I think which is very different from Le Breton moving forward. Le Breton has federal current government ownership and control of those lands. So we definitely see this as a different situation, apples and oranges.
But just referring back to the report, it does say the lands in green will be transferred from Public Works to NCC and then to Windmill. So they are federal lands that are to be transferred. They're not. There is some responsibility for another level of government, I would see here, to take responsibility for cleanup. I mean, we could split hairs on the exact type of ownership, but I would argue that that the federal government, on any time that they sell lands and they make a profit on that, they should probably sell us or sell an applicant clean lands.
Mr. Mayor, it's my understanding that the lands in green were subject to a long-term or perpetual lease, but that the land, as Ms. Dedden said, the lands were under the effective management control of the private sector, I believe, well back into the late 1800s, Mr. Mayor, unlike Le Breton, which of course is under the control of the federal government today.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it at that, and I'll ask my questions about affordable housing.
Okay. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thanks very much, and appreciate the presentation and the answers you've given so far. They clear up a bunch of questions I think that a lot of folks had. I'm in support of the application. It's a big application, certainly much bigger than we've ever seen, but in my view, it still fulfills the spirit of why the program was created. My question, I guess, maybe really dovetailing off of Councillor Eagleye and Councillor Wilkinson's, has more to do with our future capacity to respond to other applications. Not that this necessarily sets a size precedent, but looking around the tapestry of Ottawa, are there other brownfield sites that we are aware of that may be forthcoming in the next several years over the lifetime perhaps of the payout of this one, where we could be in a position where, finance tells us, well, if we respond to the brownfield application now, for site X, given that we're still paying out on this one, now we're getting into an area where, the revenue isn't quite what we expected it to be because we haven't achieved the property value tax uplift yet. So my question is that, how does this impact our ability to respond to future large applications should they come down?
Mr. Mayor, there likely could be still some future applications that will come through. It'll really depend on, what source of contaminations there are on various land ownerships. However, I think certainly from the perspective of responding to these, this definitely is a large one. We've had a few larger ones in the previous years. However, we really view this as an investment in moving forward in terms of spurring on the development that may not have taken place where we're able to increase the property tax base.
Okay, so I appreciate that. Thank you. I guess just to circle back to one of my previous questions, so anything can come through the door at any time, but you are not currently aware of, another application sitting out there, another plot of land that could generate a $20 million, $30 million application. Is that accurate?
Mr. Mayor, that is accurate as of today. No, we don't know of another one like that, no.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I have received pieces of correspondence in my office from people suggesting that the level of contamination on the site is actually possibly or probably less than what is being suggested by the staff. And apparently the environmental assessment that was done is over a decade old, and it was simply updated by DST Consulting. So I guess, and some groundwater level testing has actually indicated more recently that there's been a significant improvement in the groundwater. So before we write a check for $60 million, would it not be prudent for us to do a new study to assess at this current time the level of contaminants on that site?
Mr. Mayor, that's a great question, and studies and evaluations will continue to take place. Contaminated soils are not likely to remedy themselves with the water table issues. We will only be paying for actual costs. So Windmill will be responsible for determining and assessing, and it's in their best interest to ensure whether there's contamination or not in any of these sources. So we will only be paying actual costs. So we won't be paying any more if it is proven and demonstrated that there is not the contamination in the water sources that more recent studies may have demonstrated.
But we'll be paying a lot of money. So wouldn't it be in the city's interest and in the taxpayers' interest to ask for a new assessment before the work commences?
Mr. Mayor, we won't be paying for anything until the work commences and property taxes are paid for a full year. So we will know then whether or not there's contamination. We will not be issuing any checks.
But who is assessing? Who is assessing the contaminants and how those contaminants got there? I read one report that said the contaminants were actually trucked onto the site.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not familiar with the trucking onto the site, but just to let you know that the site report that there are contaminants on the property, and I'm aware of the water sampling that was done. There was 4 wells that were done, and it showed that it is lessened, which is good. Some portions of the buildings and some buildings on the site will be demolished, and there will be some further groundwater sampling and testing. That was written in the report as a contingency. So if those samples come back and show that, it's actually the groundwater is cleaner, then it actually shows it's gotten to be a better situation, because one level of the island is actually higher than the other. It goes down. Then Windmill will get less money through the remediation, so that that overall $60 million will go down, so the city will actually be paying less because the site is actually cleaner than they thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to clarify, as you pointed out, Ms. Sneddon, if the city doesn't pay until the work is done and the invoices are verified, and I'm assuming the MOE that verifies that it's been done to the proper provincial standards. So that's the check in the whole system. Councillor Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to be reminded, how much did we spend on remediation for the Greystone site? Anybody remember that? Leanne, you might? It was highest at...
It's 15 million, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I mean, I know that 60 million is a lot more than that, but I don't recall us having the conundrum. I do recall, because I was here when the brownfield policy came into being, and why we did that. And it was so that we could have underdeveloped properties developed and contributing to the city in a significant way, just in what they offered, but also in the taxes. For example, we have one coming up, 900 Albert. Right now we get $4 million a year or something like that, and that's it.
Yeah, just because say 8 million for 900 Albert for their grant program.
Right, but right now we get something like $4,000 a year in taxes. It's a ridiculously low amount. Developing that is to get $10 million a year in taxes. Greystone, okay, contaminated, of course, my family roots in the area, I mean, from the dumps that were there and everything else, contamination. I mean, there isn't a benefit for Windmill to say that it's a lot worse than it is, because they're paying half of it. So obviously, when we come to the point where we're contributing our amount, which again, I remind you why the brownfield policy exists, will be exactly what the costs are. Correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, just remind me, on Councillor McKenney, I think, brought up the Greenland there. Is the city contributing any money at all to that, the Greenland that she pointed out?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is part of the grant. The lands that the city is not contributing to is the parkland on either end that will remain in NCC ownership, and the hydro lands above.
Yeah. And for those of us that have been around here a long time and remember the years of Domtar when it was in full length, the level of contamination, of course, would be significant. But the other thing too is, how much is this city going to spend on the Ottawa remediation? $200+ million, okay? So let's just like give our little heads a shake here, okay? We've got LeBreton that's leaching, we're dealing with that. We've got this big thing in the middle of the river leaching, contaminants, and we're going to spend $200 million, and yet we're not going to support somebody who wants to do a beautiful job on this crucial piece of land, where green energy at its very best is being produced, and we're not going to support our brownfield policy on it. It makes no sense to me. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Okay, so members of the public, we have Taryn Glancy, a brownfields coordinator for Zibi. Taryn, sorry if I've mispronounced your name. If you can come, well, that's not Taryn, that's Jeff Wendy. All right. So we'll get you, do you have a PowerPoint, Mr. Westindy? So you'll have 5 minutes, and then followed by Lindsay Lambert, and then Peter Stockdale from the Fairleigh Community Association. Push the button there. Poussez le bouton.
Merci pour l'opportunité de présenter notre projet Zibi à vous. Mon nom c'est Jeff Westindy, je suis le président de Zibi. In 5 minutes or less, I'm going to give you a very quick briefing of the Zibi project and answer maybe with a bit more specific some of the questions that have been asked, so that when you're talking to your constituents, then you have a full understanding of the project itself. Our vision for the project is very simple. We want to revitalize a vacant, dilapidated, contaminated industrial site into one of the world's most sustainable communities. The complexity of this site cannot be underestimated. It is a $1.5 billion project on 37 acres, sits on 3 islands in the middle of the Ottawa River, and spans 2 provinces. And as everyone in this region knows, that provincial border in the Ottawa River is an awful lot wider than it looks sometimes. We have been noticed on the world stage. The master plan that was put forward, that was developed in partnership with the City of Ottawa, the NCC, the City of Gatineau, and our Algonquin partners, won the Best Master Plan Community by the Canadian Urban Institute, went on for and won the Best Master Plan Community in North America by the American Planning Institute, and then further went to Durban, South Africa, and won the International plan for the Best Master Plan, Best Master Plan Community on the planet. Quite an offer for our region. I want to touch briefly on One Planet. You'll notice in the resolution that we are asking that One Planet take the place of LEAD in the brownfield program. One Planet, to summarize it, says that we have to live as if we only have one planet. Everybody looks at me like I have horns on my head when I say that, and reminds me we only do have one planet. I remind them that if we all live like us, we need 5. That is not sustainable. One Planet is LEAD on steroids, essentially, and introduces a whole social fabric to sustainability. The brownfields application overview, one of the very important things that is different about this brownfield application than most that you have is that brownfield also, the program also covers heritage restoration. 60% of the grant for this program is targeted towards taking vacant, dilapidated buildings that represent the industrial history of our site. And you can see a picture up here of what that site used to look like, and bring them back to life and tell the story. This is a picture of the Alimetiers, some women that I think all young women, my daughters, are huge fans of the Alimetiers. They led the first organized labor strike in British North America and won against E.B. Eddy. Really pioneered women. E.B. Eddy himself, you can see with the square timbers. Ms. Steddon mentioned that our site is the poster child for the Brownfields program. You all know that our city started on this site 200 years ago. It's been industrial ever since. Since 2006, it's been vacant. It's been fenced off, locked off, no access to the Ottawa River, paying $200,000 in municipal taxes. When we're completed, we will have probably the only urban waterfront area that the City of Ottawa will have, and the Ville de Gatineau. As everyone here knows, we live in a waterfront city. Not many residents recognize we live in a waterfront city because we've turned our backs on the water. Our site is an ability to reintroduce the water to our residents. It will be a sustainability showcase. Most importantly, it will be a celebration of Ottawa's history and heritage. The federal government has expropriated and demolished just about all of the heritage that was remaining in Ottawa and Gatineau, with the exception of our site. The work that the City of Ottawa is doing allows us to recreate that industrial heritage and tell the story. This is the only time I've ever presented to FEDCO as a proponent. I've always been here as a volunteer for an economic development organization. I do want to reinforce the economic benefits of this program. Currently, this site generating $200,000 of taxes. When we're done, $10 million of taxes. The cost to the city, because it's a downtown urban site, there are no new roads that need to be built. The sewage infrastructure exists. The public transit infrastructure exists. That $18 million compared to generating $18 million in a suburban development has a huge impact on the city coffers. So I was fortunate to help the city develop the Brownfields program. I work with Hamilton, Kingston, Waterloo. Many of you know I have a background in that industry. And I think it continues to deliver value. So I do think it makes sense to review these programs on a regular basis. But the economic benefits to the city speak for themselves. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Questions? Steve, David. So, yep. Catherine. Go ahead. I think you have to leave.
I do have to leave, thank you. Sorry about that. Just wanted to follow up, of course, on the affordable housing commitment and just some of the specifics around what that means. So is it 25% and at what percentiles? I'm just thinking about the deeper subsidies as opposed to the affordability.
A great question, Councillor Kinney. I have pinged my office to get that granularity. I know the 7% is our commitment. I don't have the granularity on the quartiles that we're targeting. I will have that to your office later today. My apologies, I can't answer it today.
That's good. That's fine. I'll await the answer. Thank you.
So, Councillor Blais, please.
Thanks very much, and I appreciate that the answer I'm looking for probably has a lot to do with market conditions, et cetera, but when would you expect the completed project?
We really hope sooner than later, but we are subject to market. We've modeled the Ottawa portion of this project as being fully completed in 7 to 8 years.
Okay, and is your expectation to begin building Ottawa first or concurrently with Gatineau? How is that going to roll out?
The first residents will be moving onto the site in Gatineau this October. We have just started construction on the first structures in Ottawa as we speak. We're in for building permit right now, so we'll see both commercial and residential occupants on the Ottawa side of the project next spring.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Councillor Chernishenko.
I didn't have questions for the delegation. I was simply signaling that Councillor McKenney wanted to ask, and I was going to give her my seat. So.
Oh, okay. Councillor Harder, did you have a question?
I already spoke.
Okay. Councillor Deans.
Thank you, and thanks for being here, Mr. Westeindy. I just want to talk about the contamination on the site with you a little bit, because in some of the correspondence that I've been receiving in my office, one person wrote to me that although Le Breton Flats is dirty due to scrapyards and industries that left oil, PCBs, and other major contaminants in the soil, on the island it's a different story, that was a pulp and paper operation using chlorides and sulfides, and those are water soluble and wash away. So this person says that they met with John Westeindy. I take it that's your dad?
I'm guessing my brother, Jonathan, yeah.
On February 2nd, 2015, pointed that out to him, and he replied that it's industrial fill that had been brought onto the site. So are you aware of that, and what kind of fill was that?
So the site has been industrial for a little over 200 years, Councillor Deans. While it was pulp and paper for a while, it was also a lumber industry, hydrogeneration, and today we view industries as being very insular. So if we have a pulp and paper mill, it is just that mill. At the turn of the century, those mills had blacksmith shops, paint shops, plenty of hydrocarbons to fuel things, et cetera, et cetera. So they're much more fully integrated. The site, there's 37 acres in total. Spend an awful lot of time talking about the contamination, but there are areas of the site where no fill has been brought in. There are areas of the site where the river was actually filled to create more land for the industrialists back in the day. The site has a wide variety of contaminants. It's been studied by a number of engineers. As the mayor had mentioned, it's regulated by the Ministry of Environment. It would be fantastic news for us as the proponent if there is less contamination there. It would be absolutely terrible news for the Ottawa River, because that's where the contamination has gone. But importantly, from the grant point of view, we will only clean up contamination that is present, and if it's not present, we would not receive any kind of a grant from the city for that. So it would make me very pleased if we apply for, or if we qualify for much less than $60 million.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Westeindy, can you give us a little bit of background on the work you've done with First Nations, positioning your organization to engage the First Nations community in employment and other opportunities?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. So this site is literally where Canada's three founding nations physically met, and everybody here knows there continues to be a very strong Francophone presence in our region, a very strong Anglophone presence in the region. However, the Algonquins, whose traditional territory we're on, do not have as strong a presence as either of those other cultures, so we've gone well out of our way to engage with the Algonquins. I actually spent the day yesterday up with the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan with Chief Kirby White Duck and his council. We had a feast with the community to celebrate the signing of our collaborative benefits agreement with the community. We've also signed a collaborative benefits agreement with the Algonquins of Ontario that represent, they have an agreement in principle whose treaty lands cover our lands as well as lands in Ottawa and Eastern Ontario. And then we have great economic links with the community of Kitigan-Zibi. Many of our suppliers come from Kitigan-Zibi. In fact, one of the things we're the proudest of is when we started remediating Quebec side last year, 80% of our work crew was Algonquin that physically cleaned up that land, and that was something that I know is very important to our Algonquin partners.
That's great, thank you. Anything else from the councillors? Okay, our speaker is Lindsay Lambert, who is here to speak on this issue.
Please put that map up on the main screen, or the English one that was there before.
So you'll have 5 minutes, Mr. Lambert.
Okay, thank you. One thing which, like you all have my written submission, or should by now, one thing I mentioned as just a final note, which I think deserves to be mentioned right up front, is this application is specifically for 3 and 4 Booth Street. I did some research into this one because I was curious as to what's encompassed in these 2 street addresses. And I found the answer in the Region 03 assessment rule for property taxes. Like you're all finance, and you'll know that this has to be accurate because people are charged accordingly. Well, 3 Booth is the area with the striped lines just to the east of Booth Street. 4 Booth, that area of the striped lines to the west of Booth Street. There's also 6 Booth, and 6 Booth, according to the property tax registry, is 3 hydraulic lots adjacent to and south of 3 Booth, also on Chaudière Island. Like Albert Island isn't included in this, and 3 and 4 Booth represent about half of Chaudière Island, so Albert Island isn't included. Like Windmill right now is identifying Albert Island as 6 Booths, but I'm inclined to accept the property tax registry. Like I produced a little map showing the locations which coincide with that, and there are 2 years of notes from the property tax assessment rolls. The current one, there is no change. Okay. Another point is who's responsible for paying for the remediation of this land. This comes down to land ownership and jurisdiction. And from the legal history, it's the federal government. They have the sole responsibility, and I have the proof for that one. Because I've been looking at the legal history. The province of the government of Canada, back when Canada was Upper and Lower Canada, this is on August 25th, 1854, reserved the Chaudière Islands for public purposes. And you might be interested to know that along with that, they reserved Lot 39 on the Ottawa shoreline, which is on LeBreton Flats. But there's that. The British North America Act, Section 108, specifies that land set apart for public purposes and rivers, land set apart for general public purposes and lake improvements become the property of the new Government of Canada. I don't have a copy of that because I'd have to print out the whole BNA Act, but it's easy to find online. This is further reinforced in an act respecting certain works on the Ottawa River. This was assented to in 1870, still in force. It establishes that Parliament has exclusive authority over everything in or on the Ottawa River, like irrespective of whether it is for the purpose of public utility or not, or built by the government or private interests. And it is all, what's the direct quote? It shall be held to be works for the general advantage of Canada. And remember, the islands were federal government at that time. And no, gee whiz, this is federal government responsibility. 1 minute. And the other thing I have is about the contaminated sites on the islands. Like I have, like Windmill produced a Phase 1 environmental site assessment. It contains 20 pages of analyses done by Indian and Northern Affairs in 1980 and 81. And like it has all the GPS locations, all the findings are consistent. And this material came from the Federal Registry of Contaminated Sites. I corresponded with the Indigenous and Northern Affairs. I have a reply from the Assistant Deputy Minister saying I would like to confirm that there are no contaminated sites on the islands. The Federal Registry of Contaminated Sites that you note in your letter is an error on this point. So that's something. The National Capital Commission and the Treasury Board of Canada designated the Chaudière Islands as national interest landmass.
If you could wrap up, you're over your time.
National interest landmass in 1988. I've obtained the documentation, and it has for the hydraulic lots on Chaudière Islands, under environmental, it says there are no environmental concerns with this site.
Thank you. Thank you. You're well over your time now. Does anyone have any questions?
Just one more thing.
No. Everyone's following the same rules, so your 5 minutes are up. I'm sorry. Are there any questions for Mr. Lambert?
Sorry.
No.
I said, here's it.
No. Sorry. Mr. Lambert. Okay, our next guest is Peter Stockdale. Mr. Lambert. Mr. Lambert, thank you very much, but you have to follow the rules like everyone else. You're not more special than any other guest that has come and spoken for 5 minutes. We have another guest, out of respect for his time, I'd ask that you leave the table, and thank you. So Peter Stockdale from the Fairleigh Community Association is our next guest, and Mr. Stockdale, you have 5 minutes.
All I ask here is the city call when it's over.
Okay. Welcome.
You can keep the previous property piece up just for reference. Thank you for listening. And you've received my email regarding the 2014 ESA study. I want you to consider the wisdom of emptying your coffers with $60 million in an election year when you're celebrating finding $6 million. It makes sense for you to have been supporting an infant industry like Windmill, a quality developer. Things have changed, so Windmill is not in control of this anymore. It's Dream, 80%-20 split now. It's not a 50-50 thing, so things are not the same. Dream has assets of $15 billion. It's not the same as Windmill. Building is already well underway in Hull. Demolition is underway on Chaudière Island, and they're coming to you now. So it seems to me a little bit after the fact unnecessary. What was the basis of their decision to, that is the staff's decision to go ahead with this? It was a literature review of an NCC study from 2006 when the NCC was going to take possession of the Domtar patents of what still is, federal leasehold land. We've heard mention of the 4 pits from 2014, which were contaminated, but are now clean. Where were the pits? The pits, only the 4 pits, were on Albert Island, where 2/3 of the land, which you can see, is unpatented federal land. There's nothing, and then the address has already been off Albert. Is already been mentioned by Mr. Lambert. It's been incorrectly identified in the first place. So Albert Island's not even part of it, and this is the basis of your decision. The rest is just a literature review from the past NCC study. It's all leasehold federal, and it appears logically in a registry of contaminated federal land. So why are we paying for it? Looking at what's being actually removed, the ESA assumes removal of the surface fill. But that's not what's happening. It's not going down to bedrock throughout on the Gatineau side or on Chaudière Island now. They're only going subsurface in the area on Chaudière Island where there's parking going to be. So what are we paying for? Finally, surely the project would still be obliged to follow the 7% social housing component. They've made the commitment whether the city is paid $60 million or not. And it's unfair to put them as hostages, essentially, on whether we pay $60 million. Finally, just to add, regarding the contact with the Algonquin, I note that the agreement in principle was actually voted down by Pikwakanagan First Nation. So where are we there? Thank you for your time.
Any questions for Mr. Stockdale? Great, thank you. Councillor Chernishenko, you had comments?
Thank you very much. When I look at this whole issue in front of us, I think it's important to step back and remind ourselves why we have the brownfields remediation program in the first place. And I see there's two fundamental reasons for it. One is we would like contaminated sites to get cleaned up. Somebody has to do it. Unfortunately, with a lot of historical sites, the somebody has long ago left. Maybe an insolvent company, maybe someone that doesn't exist anymore, or maybe a government, an organization that just doesn't have the will or the money or the desire to make it a priority to do so. And so we get land that sits fallow, and that's I suppose, for staying contaminated and undealt with. It's not any less contaminated, or as Mr. West-90 said, if any of that contamination has migrated off-site, that's not a good thing either. It getting less contaminated doesn't mean it just went away. It migrated off-site. So cleanup is one. The other very fundamental one is that we as a city don't want to encourage development on greenfield sites when there are alternatives. That is, we heard the comment about cost of servicing to new sites, whether they be in an urban environment or a suburban or rural one. Greenfield sites, certainly in my mind, should be kept wherever they can be, natural or for agriculture or other reasons. So we are trying to encourage brownfield redevelopment, and this is a policy that facilitates that. It offers an incentive to the developer to do the work in exchange for broad strokes, a deferral of costs, and ultimately the city will recoup in spades in the future that investment, let's call it an investment from the city. So I don't see this as some of our correspondents and letters to editors have said this is some sort of corporate welfare program that we're handing out money to a company to do work. And in that sense, it's not really relevant to me whether a company has got $10 billion in assets or $1 million in assets. If they're doing the work and they're following the same rules and they qualify for the same percentage, then everybody's playing by the same rules. I look at the Greenfield, the Greystone Village development within the heart of my ward. Would that work have got done? Would we see the sort of urban intensification, and I say that in a good way, that is occurring if we didn't have this program? That was a very significant contaminated site. And if we were to look at who contaminated the site and should we hold them to it, well, this is an odd one to say. It was mostly oblate fathers in their robes with pails full of ashes from burning coal, going out and throwing them on their gardens because thought to be a good thing to do at the time. We now know differently. But are we going to hold them responsible for the cleanup? I don't think so. But through this mechanism, somebody is, and the work is going to be done. So really, that's what matters to me. The amount, it's a big figure. It's a staggeringly large figure, which causes people some concern. But it is come to based on an estimate of the cleanup site, and ultimately, it will be a percentage that anyone else would be paying anyway. So there's no benefit to a developer in making up contamination that doesn't exist. They are going to have to demonstrate that the work was done, or in paying money that they
would have been able to avoid otherwise. So I've heard a number of concerns, a number of critiques of this. Ultimately, I don't think they stand the test. I will be supporting this application for the exact same reasons I've supported a couple of sites in the Glebe along Bank Street where there was a service station or others, and supported the Greystone Village. Thank you.
Well said. Other comments on the report? Carried. We'll go to the library now. I apologize. I know our chief librarian and the chair of the library board have been waiting for us. Just Councillor Deans had to leave, so the issue that she was going to hold, she's going to deal with at council for capital budget adjustments. Can we pass that? I think she had a question about the autonomous vehicle track, $300,000. Yeah. Carried? Okay. So, okay. I think it was, yeah, we'll get her in touch with Mr. Willis to get clarification. So this is a very exciting city building project, as we all know, and I want to take a moment to end Chair Tierney on two things. First of all, congratulations, re-elected as Ontario Chair for FCM, which is great news for us. It's great to have your voice around that table. And secondly, this has been a long time coming, and we're seeing the beginning of the start that Councillor Harder really started the ball rolling many years ago, and Councillor Tierney is going to see it over the finish line. And we had a very good public library board meeting yesterday, and today we have the staff report, and I think is Danielle MacDonald here as well? So she's there if we have any questions, and we have the presentation, first comments by Councillor Tierney and then the presentation. So Chair, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of FEDCO. First of all, yes, you're quite correct. I do want to acknowledge our CEO and our great staff at the OPL are in the gallery, as well as representatives from Library and Archives Canada, as well as Trustee Fisher. So thank you for coming here today. First of all, I'm very pleased to report that the Public Library Board voted to approve the Central Library Report, receiving the implementation plan, approve the partnership with Library and Archives Canada, and the disposal of the Metcalfe Street property. It was an important milestone for the Ottawa Public Library. The board made one tweak in its recommendations, saying it wants to see project information updates on a regular basis, something that our General Manager, Steve Willis, readily agreed to. There was approximately 90 minutes of consideration, a series of questions from all these. It's fair to summarize that the board is wanting a robust public input. That public ideas lead to the design and the function of the new library, and it will be heard to create this great new national landmark. You quite correctly pointed out, Mr. Mayor, this has been a passion for several years, whether it was even back from Rick Shirelli to Jan Harder, even Bob Shirelli. I think a lot of us all wanted this new central library, and it's finally coming to fruition. But it couldn't have been done without the patience and the pragmatic thinking of our board. They spent quite a bit of time thinking about how we would get to this point. And we can see we received $73 million from the great work. Thank you for the help, Mr. on bringing two great bodies together to create an even better library system. So on that note, I'll turn the floor over to Steve Willis.
Just, I neglected to mention there's a technical amendment, Councillor El-Shantiri. I think if we put that up, we can just introduce that now, so it's on the floor. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is the Article 11 in your folder? It doesn't show the column on the right, so therefore be it resolved that Table 3 be amended to add the column titled Parking Facility Cost / Revenue as indicated below. Table 3 estimated debt funded requirement. So the last column in your report is not shown.
So that was just left off. Okay, Mr. Willis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sharing this presentation today with Mr. Alain Gontier, who's the Director of Infrastructure Services, and as Chair Tierney has already acknowledged, we have Danielle MacDonald, who's the CEO of the Ottawa Public Library. subject matter experts in the audience from several city departments, and our guests from Library and Archives Canada here today. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that the excitement is certainly growing for the new Ottawa Public Library and Archives Canada joint facility. This is public infrastructure that cities of our size are building as an essential part of their cultural, educational, social, and economic offerings.